Governor Wes Moore has bet big on quantum computing while pushing Maryland toward 100% clean energy. But PJM Interconnection, a regional electricity transmission organization in the eastern United States, including the state of Maryland, warns that the grid is fragile, as evidenced by electric generation shortfalls during peak demand periods, and the fact that electricity prices, this was a shocking figure, have spiked over 1,000% since 2023. Mike, the governor has placed a big bet on making Maryland the global capital of quantum. Those were his words. And with Microsoft and others investing, that strategy to create high-tech jobs may pay off.
It may. I mean, I think quantum is certainly a place to be looking at making some bets, but the reality is that, especially I think we as Maryland, looking at what we just talked about with the job loss, need to also be looking at what are we doubling down on that's near-term growth potential. I think quantum is great, but it's still out in the future, and we should be a player in it. And I think to your point, though, on the energy piece, and it's interesting because if you read the governor's quote, he'll talk about an all-in strategy, but really the all-in strategy is focused more solely on kind of solar and wind. And I think given where we are from a data center perspective, where we are from a quantum perspective, given where we are just from a energy supply perspective, we should be looking at truly an all-in strategy and all-in approach. We just need to be there. And if we're going to be competitive economically, Maryland needs to be looking more at the data centers, needs to be looking more at quantum, needs to be looking at more at energy-intensive industries, and we can't be in a position right now where we don't have sufficient resources.
Mark, but time and time again, Mike's point is spot on, but time and time again, the General Assembly and even local governments have resisted the development of transmission lines. They've resisted the development of new technologies that involve fossil fuels. How is the state going to respond to these needs?
Well, what we need is what is called dispatchable power. That is power that is available when there is peak demand. The issue with electricity is it's a just-in-time commodity. And so having solar and wind when basically we're not at peak demand is not as helpful. In order to have dispatchable power, you really need to have more nuclear. You need basically gas and natural gas and potentially coal as well. And there's a shortfall. Maryland needs to import about 40% of its electric power. And when it's getting dispatchable power, it's drawing from out of state. And that issue is really not being addressed. Instead, the governor and the Democrats in the legislature are blaming sort of blaming the news, which is PJM, which passes on the costs that take place when there's a spike in demand, when there's a need for dispatchable power. Could I come back just to take a little extra time on quantum computer? Listen, the three of us all remember when $1 billion was a lot of money. And that's the amount of money that we're talking about in Maryland. Yeah. And to put this in context, in Loudoun County, the assessed value of all the data centers out there has now climbed to $40 billion. And there was something like, I think, 25 more data centers under construction. The $1 billion, which is being leveraged from some private investments as well, is a lot of money. I get that, but it is a drop in the bucket to the amount of investment that is coming into data centers, which is one of the key elements to quantum computer, that the level of investments that are being made in this sector.
Well, I have to say, Mark, you just blew my head apart when you talked about not only the amount of money involved, but also the number of data centers that are being built in Loudoun County. When just 2 days ago, I read in the Washington Post that Prince George's County is going to put a hold on the development of Landover Mall as a data center because they want to study it more. I mean, my goodness, analysis by paralysis has always been the problem with the state of Maryland and Montgomery County for that matter. So, Mike, should we go back and re-look at everything and we go back to fracking in Western Maryland and exporting LNG? What's the solution here?
Well, if I had the solution, I probably wouldn't be sitting on this show having a conversation with you two, but that notwithstanding.
Thank you. Thank you for that backhand compliment. I really appreciate that.
But no.
Wasting time with us schlubs, right?
No, I'd be out there telling everybody else what the answers were. But no, I think that the challenge really is for us to have a strategy that looks at that. I mean, look, do I like the fact that the Trump administration has basically cut down all of the solar operations that have moved forward? No, but the reality is that they have and have some legal rights within which to do that. I mean, Ørsted, well, I mean, their stock price has gone in the tank because effectively they had their wind farm off of Rhode Island that was 75% completed that was shut down by this administration. So, I mean, the reality is we have to look at those things and say, if not this, then what? And we can be right and say, well, it should be solar. Well, maybe it should be, maybe it shouldn't be. But if that's not going to happen, then what other solutions do we have on the table? And so I think we've got to be in a position to start looking across the board. I mean, I think to the extent that we can look at nuclear, that we can look at natural gas, look at those that are somewhat more renewable. I'm not a big fan of coal. I don't think we should necessarily be going in that direction. But that notwithstanding, I think we've got to be looking at kind of an all options kind of an approach, because I mean, from an economic perspective, the region is trailing many of the other growth regions in the country anyway. And if you look at Maryland, you look at Montgomery County in particular, we're the tail end of the region. So right now we are way behind any place where we ought to be, and not having access to energy resources only puts us at further disadvantage.